Hey, Brad. How would you assess the job Joe Missoula did in his first year as head coach? I know he was thrust into the position just right before the regular season began. How would you assess the job that he did this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you consider the position he was thrust into and the overall accomplishments of the group, I thought he did a really good job. I mean, when you look at it in the big picture and having a team that was second in offense, second in defense, won 57 games and has a chance to go to the NBA Finals, on your home court. There's a lot of direction and organization that goes into that. I thought that he did a good job.
Brad, how much of what went wrong this year can be fixed through transactions that you can make versus just internal improvement?
Well, I think you, just like anything else, John, you always look at, the bottom line is we got to get better, right? And so how do we get better? Obviously, whoever is here needs to continuously work to get better and use these accomplishments and disappointments as motivation to become hungrier and to continue to work. And I have no doubt within the character of our group that we'll do that. That's what these guys have always been about, and they've always done that. And then, we'll always look at how do we best, evaluate our roster and make the small tweaks that maybe can put you over the top. Obviously, we're in an interesting situation because I think, again, we're 48 minutes away from, doing our pregame shoot-around press conference today, right? Like in the finals. So there was a lot that went right, and we can't lose sight of that. But we also, are always going to be thinking about how to best move it forward and, pursue what we're all trying to pursue.
Brad, is Joe Missoula the best head coach for this team going forward? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think he is. And I thought he, again, did a really good job with this group. Everybody's going to overreact to the best players and coaches after every game. That's always the way it is. We know that going in, so we have to, be able to judge things on the whole. And he's a terrific leader. He'll only get better at anything that, he can learn from this year because he's constantly trying to learn. And he's accountable. Those leadership qualities are hard to find. I know they're easy to talk about, but when you can show all those through the expectations and the microscope that he was under, that's hard to do. And so, yeah, was he perfect? Would he like to have some moments back? Every coach would. Even the coaches nobody talks about would, right? And we all that have coached know how hard that is. And at the same time, our players, our staff, everybody around him, believe in him, and we got to do our best to, support him going forward. And I think it's really important that, we share results here. This is not, outside of our walls, we can do the dissecting of whose fault things are. Inside of our walls, we have 60 people in basketball operations, and we all got to do the best we can, to get the results we want. And we all share it when it goes our way, and we share it when it doesn't go our way. And that's got to start with all of us. And we have to all look at it that way. And I'm appreciative of our coaches being that way. Admire our players being that way. It is not easy to get up there and be accountable and to take ownership, and know that all through it you accomplished a lot to get to the point where we were. And so I have a great deal of admiration for their willingness to do that, and I think it speaks to the quality of character we have in here, and we just have to be a little bit better.
Brad, you guys lost some members of the coaching staff, throughout the year. Mm-hmm. I know the timing was tough, but what was the thinking in terms of not adding to the coaching staff throughout the year, and do you feel in hindsight you left the staff shorthanded at all in that front?
Well, I think one of the things is obviously we had a change in coaches 5 days before the season started, and we did try to add to the staff at that time. But you're also weighing, like, you've got a lot of people that are really talented in here. I mean, I'm sure you'll see, and as be talked about, like our assistants this year, and our assistants pretty much every year, are going to be called and asked by a lot of teams. So we have a good staff, and I think that that's one thing that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, right? Because we did have a lot of people that we lost too, but the staff we had was good. And we did try. Losing Damon in March, we again tried. But those timings are tough for people to up and move or up and, join a new team that they don't know anything about or don't know. But that was, just to be supplemental because we believed in the people that were here. Moving forward, we'll have at least, we'll see how everything shakes itself out with what the staff looks like, but we'll at least have one addition that we'll make now that we have a summer to make it, and we'll go from there.
Just real quick to clear up any potential gray area, Joe is back next year.
Yeah.
With Grant, it was kind of an up and down season for him. How do you kind of view, his importance to this franchise and this team, and how do you anticipate on your end kind of the summer unfolding and your desire to keep him?
Yeah, listen, Grant's a good player. Grant has been a good player. I can't talk about, as you know, with Jalen Grant or whoever, I can't talk about details of contracts. And specifically with Grant's own restricted free agency, all those are down the road right now as far as when we can discuss those things with him or with you. But he is a good player who was on a really deep team. And with that, with the addition of Brogdon last year, that was going to require that, guys that had gotten a little bit more opportunity weren't going to get as much. And that obviously hit a few of our players, Payton included. And Grant was another one of them. But everybody around the league knows that Grant can, add value to a winning team. We know that. We're big fans of his, and, I thought he played, did a lot of good things when he got the opportunity. But I don't think it was an easy, roster to always decide who would play because we did have a lot of good players.
And just briefly, Malcolm mentioned maybe he might need surgery. Is there any idea on that? And how is Jason doing, or any other possible?
Yeah, I mean, we had a number of guys by the end, but probably no more than every other team does, so certainly not excuses. Jason's feeling a little bit better, but he's got a pretty decent ankle sprain. And Malcolm, we're going to put our heads together, and he'll put his head together with his agent and figure out what he wants to do with regard to next steps. You probably saw Derek. Derek, luckily, his knee at the end was just a hyperextension, just a small sprain. And we've got a couple of other things that we'll have to address and look at here moving forward. But, that's no different than anybody else that plays till May 29th or whatever.
Brad, a couple of players mentioned by the end of the year losing a defensive identity, not getting to the point defensively that they were at last year, and just general frustration about their play at that end. When the messaging was offense for a lot of the year from Joe, from the coaching staff, how do you guys kind of grapple with the players wanting to get back to defense?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to do is, look at what's true, right? And we're the second best defense in the NBA, right? So something was good too, right? And we were the second best offense in the NBA in the regular season. So that usually portends to give you a great shot. There's no question that Rob's injury at the start of the year and him only playing 35 regular season games made it tougher to be, maybe from a lineup standpoint, what we could be defensively at our most dynamic. And so at the end of the day, I thought that, we had to improve offensively to become better, to compete. And we had to be able to play defense and maintain that level and identity that we had prior to be our very best. And, on both ends, we came up a little bit short. I do think that if I had to say, one end that we came up more short on in our last few games, it was probably the offensive end, with the turnovers. And we obviously didn't shoot the ball well, and Miami shot it great. Like, that's the one thing that, the competition is real. The competition is tough. Miami was terrific. Miami played a terrific series. But overall, I thought we were good on both ends of the floor when I looked at it in totality. Could we have been better? Sure.
On that Rob point, he's a starter last year. You guys do go double big a lot last year. He obviously coming back from surgery ends up on the bench there. How do you kind of view the next steps for him and just him being a major part of this team?
I mean, he's a huge part of our opportunity to be great, right? And I think that's obvious. And we saw a little bit of that obviously in the Phillies series when we went back to it. In the Miami series though, it was a lot harder. They went small, fast, and spread us out, and we're running great action, and they made it tough for us to defend those guys on the perimeter, and they made a ton of shots from a lot of different places and a lot of different people. But Rob does give us a different, dynamic, right, with his ability to play way above the rim on both ends of the floor. And, as we went through the regular season, it was much about getting him healthy towards the finish line and making him ready to play those big minutes in the playoffs. And for the most part, he was able to do so. He was sick in Game 7 and played a little bit less than maybe he would have. But other than that, I thought he gave us what he could in the playoffs and, felt pretty good from a leg standpoint throughout the playoffs. He did ding his wrists up a little bit, but again, everybody's got that.
How involved were you from one playoff game to the next, especially during the Eastern Conference Finals, in coming up with strategy and in adjustments from one matchup to the next?
My job is to be here to support everybody in this building with whatever they need at that time. And, if somebody wanted to talk about something, or if there was something that felt like, we needed to share, I just think it's important to limit the noise and be on one page. And so certainly would be involved with conversations and those type of things on how we were going to play or who we were going to play. But it wasn't my decision, and I wanted that to be very clear that whatever the coaching staff decides, we all support. And it's one of the toughest things about being a coach is you have a million different ideas coming from a million different people. And so to be able to sift through that and to be able to make the right decision for the team is a challenge. And so we have to limit that within here to the best that we can.
And then how important, as you fill out the coaching staff, is it to add people who have head coaching experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, Joe's experience now is you could probably measure in dog years, right? Because he's been in 3 Eastern Conference Finals and a Finals, and he's been in, now the head coach throughout one of those runs. That's a experience in and of itself. I tried to prepare him for what it was going to feel like after each game, win or lose. And I know how that feels for those guys, and that's one of the reasons why I always talk about how much I respect Jalen and Jason, because it's the same thing, right? Like, after every game that doesn't go your way, that they're going to be dissected, and the further you go, the more it is, and so that hey, you can have a great regular season, and when you're playing when no one else is playing, everyone's watching, and so that's just part of it. So the more that we can, again, be there to support. So back to your question with being, head coaching experience, I think it's, he's got a ton of that. But we're going to look for, with at least, again, one addition to the bench, and he'll lead this charge. We'll look for somebody that's got a lot of NBA experience for sure.
Brad, throughout the year, players talked a lot about not getting bored with the little things, and especially said it's really on them and not really on Joe to create that sense of urgency and motivation. So from your perspective, from your perch as a leader and as Joe's perch and his leadership, what do you guys need to do to create a little bit more of a culture shift to make sure that sense of urgency is more consistent?
Well, again, Jared, I want to be I don't want to overreact. We have an incredibly resilient group. They're tough. With their backs against the wall, they're amazing. And at the same time, we came up short. And, certainly I thought a big part of coming up short was our early play in the last 2 series. Especially in the Miami series, right, when you go down 0-3, and Game 3 was awful. But the rest, we had our opportunities in Philly Game 1. We had our opportunity in Philly Game 4. We had our opportunity in Miami Game 1 and 2. Those are opportunities where we played well a lot of the time, but we weren't good enough for as many possessions as you need to be to put those games away. And so when I talk about urgency, it's not like you don't want to. It's not like you don't bring the right mindset. It's just about putting that full 48 together. And that's shared results. That's on all of us. Again, it's not, not coaches, not players. I look at how can I help everybody do that better, right? So we all play a role in that. We all have to play better for 48 minutes if we want to win. And in every game, they're all worth one in the playoffs. And we saw what we were like with our backs against the wall, with the exception of Game 7. We were pretty good.
And then Joe obviously had to install a program and a lot of shift, I think, in the way you guys played, right away. How does him having a full summer to try to maybe build out more complexity and variation help?
Well, I mean, I might have said this in September. I couldn't have done that, right? I always needed a whole summer of planning and a whole summer of thinking and organizing thoughts and being able to get yourself ready to emphasize what you want to emphasize on a daily basis. And so there's no question that'll be a huge benefit. To do what they did in 5 days and to get ready for the season and to start the season the way we did, I think was a little bit more remarkable than people outside the building would have thought. I certainly, was leaning on the leadership of them at that time because that was not an easy thing.
Brad, how close to your vision when you were building this team was what you saw on the floor?
I think the goal was not attained. So I look at it as how can we be a little bit better? And yet a lot of our times when we were playing, you could see that there's a lot there, right? So it's not far. And I think, again, this is, we all ride the roller coasters, and I certainly do, of the playoffs. But you also, from my perspective, have to sit up here and say, it's really hard to be in the mix. And so we just got to figure out how to get a little bit better. But to stay in the mix, we've got a lot of foundational things that are good.
And you built this team, taking it from Danny, based on the old collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
How much of a curveball has the new parameters, let's say? How much of a curveball has that been for you? And how much does that change the course of what you've been trying to do?
Well, we don't even have a final document yet, right? We're still waiting on the final document. So I'd like to speak like I know everything. I know, just like you do, 99.9% of it. But there will be a surprise in there somewhere, I'm sure. But yeah, it has taken this time of the year, and our whole staff has had to learn that and make sure we know it inside and out, and make sure we're prepared for all the different things the curveballs that could throw. But certainly there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of nuance to it. Luckily, Mike and Austin are sitting back there. They know it way better than I do, and we'll be prepared to tackle that for sure.
And just to follow up on that, Brad, is that needs to be you guys are set up to bring a lot of the core back here,
Yeah.
pretty well set for the future. What's the challenge there from a the limitations that kind of put you guys on from a team building standpoint moving forward, and would it potentially force you guys into tougher decisions earlier?
Every team's going to have to make tough decisions every year, right? But at the end of the day, you know, we love our foundation, we love our core, and that's really our focus and priority.
And you mentioned offensively, you guys thought that was the biggest issue at the end of the playoffs for you guys.
Just those last couple games. I
yeah.
mean, maybe we don't win Game 6, right? It goes both ways. It's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, Brian. I mean, Game 6 we played pretty well. We didn't shoot it well. We were 7 for 35 from 3, right? And we struggled late in that game. You know, one of the reasons we struggled late in that game because they were scoring every time and setting up their 2-2-1. Then we're not going to be able to play fast up the court because they're extending the floor to make you take time to start your play later, and then we get into kind of our stagnancy that hurt us a couple times late, and that's not a new thing, right? And so we were way better most of the season late in games, but in the playoffs we had moments where we got back to that. Everything plays a role in that. That's all tied together. It all fits together. But I thought that, you know, we struggled offensively to generate great looks, you know, at times against Miami's defense.
And on that note, do you feel like you guys were too reliant on the three-point shot at the end of the playoffs there, knowing that that shot wasn't obviously there for you at that point?
You know, from my standpoint, my goal every time down the floor is to get a great shot. And obviously I would love for that to be a dunk. Everyone in the world would love for that to be a dunk. We had trouble getting by that first line of defense with all the help in hands and activity, right? And so that takes away some of that. And then you hope that you're skilled enough and you know, you're able to take advantage of open looks. And there are some looks that are great and some looks that are a little bit more forced and contested, and that's probably every game. But I'm more focused on what's a great shot, not, hey, we need to do this or that. You know, it's, can we get dunks? Can we get to the free throw line? Can we get open threes? That's how I evaluate a game. And then for me, the way I've always looked at it is which team towards the end of that series is getting more the looks they're getting are more in their wheelhouse of how they're generating them well and everything else. And I thought Miami did a really good job in Game 7 specifically of generating what they want and keeping us from getting what we wanted.
You mentioned you love your core. Do you plan on offering Jalen Brown an extension this summer, and do you get a sense that he still wants to play in Boston?
Well, I've gotten nothing but great conversations with Jalen, but we can't talk about all that stuff, as I said earlier with Grant. Like, I'm not allowed to talk about, the contract details, let alone the extension, because it's not of that time yet. Right now, his window is between July 1st and October or whatever it is. And but I can say, you know, without a doubt, like, we want Jalen to be here, and he's a big part of us, and we believe in him, and I'm thankful for him. And you know, and I said this earlier, I'm really thankful for when those guys have success, they come back to work, and when they get beat, they own it and they come back to work. And so I know that that's what they're about. And that's hard to find. It's kind of like what I talked about with leadership earlier. Those qualities aren't for everybody. So, you know, Jalen had a great year, all NBA year. You know, he's a big part of us moving forward in our eyes.
Payton was pretty open with us, especially at the trade deadline, even saying he was kind of hoping he would be traded. How do you balance a situation like that with understanding he could be a part of this team, but also, you know, wanting to do right by him? He's a guy that loves basketball.
Yeah, everybody loves basketball. It's a hard job, you know, and you get paid a lot to handle those situations. And but I really feel for a guy like him, because there are guys that work at it, and then there are guys that are obsessed with it, and he's obsessed with it. You know, that's kind of his personality. He works at it. He's a really good player. As I've told him many times this year, everybody knows you're a really good player, not only in this building but around the league. they understand your circumstances, that we have Derek White, that we have Marcus Smart, that we have Malcolm Brogdon, you know, that in the playoffs you only go 7 or 8 deep in a lot of cases. But we don't know how that's all going to shake itself out moving forward. And so I'm a big Payton fan. I believe in him, and everybody here does, and we'll see how everything shakes itself out again. But he's a good player.
And just lastly, and you said a couple of times, you guys are right there, you've been right there, but there's still that last step. If you had to kind of step back, what do you think you guys need to take that last step?
You know, as I kind of do the post-mortem of the season, there are all these things that we've talked about, and then I go back to, if we're over 500 at home, we would have had rest and we've been in the finals. And I know that sounds too simple, but we need to be, you know, we need to be better on offense. We need to be better on defense. We need to be better helping all through the seats we're in here within this building. And we need to play better. You know, we need to play better when we work all year for home court advantage. and so there's all kinds of things. And that's why the margin is so slim when you're talking about doing a freaking end of the season press conference or playing finals game 1 tonight, you know, and that's one of the toughest things to swallow in this, is how slim that is. Thank you, Brad. Thank you.